Hey everybody, Eric Switzer here. We're taking a look at Star Wars Outlaws with features lead Jade King.
Wom. That's my lightsaber sound. Wom.
hmm
Zoom. Zoom. There's no lightsabers in this game.
Good start for a Star Wars game. This one, Jade, is a little bit personal for you, right? Because you're a bit of an outlaw.
Yeah, it's true. Like, when I started playing this game, I was like, okay, I'm an outlaw. It's near and dear to my heart. And I really
Yeah.
hope that this Star Wars game captures that?
And how well does it capture the experience of being an outlaw?
It's alright. Kay Vess, the main character, is not a very good outlaw. You spend the first several hours of that game going, man, you're like just a really shit Han Solo, huh? But I feel like that's almost the point. You're kind of like scrambling together to not get murdered for 40 hours.
Mm.
But it's fun, yeah. Before we get into specifics, I guess I'll say Star Wars Outlaws. It felt like a lot of people had already labelled this as a forgettable Ubisoft game before it even came out, especially with some of the gameplay we've seen. But from the time I've spent with it, it's a good bit of fun. It's like Watch Dogs meets Uncharted if it was in the Star Wars universe. It's kind of the easiest way
Okay.
to break it down.
Yeah, I'm not so ready to write off Ubi's open world games anymore as just being carbon copies of each other. I think Avatar was doing a lot of interesting
Yeah,
things, a lot of new things for Ubi, even though it started with a template. And this one, it makes sense that it would sort of start with a Watchdog template, but I totally believe you if you say that it's got some new ideas. But is it
yeah.
enough?
Oh gosh, I'd say as someone who has kind of left behind those Ubisoft open world games for a good few years now that I think it might be. This is more
Mm.
compelling than I ever gave it credit for. But I will note it has quite a slow start and it doesn't do a wonderful job of like telling us who KVS is, what our motivations are, or what the driving force is behind the main plot essentially. But once you've got your speeder and you've got a ship and you have like 4 or 5 planets to choose from that you can kind of explore at your leisure, it becomes this enjoyable open world experience where you're working with different syndicates, you're discovering stuff in the open world of your own accord, and you're not chasing those icons that people assume you're going to be in a
Mm.
Ubisoft open world game like this. If anything, I'd say the open world zones that you're given in each planet are big enough but not too big in that it feels like, well, I'm not going to go and do that because it's a total waste of time, or it's just like a copy and paste encounter. It's more like, oh, okay, I'm going to go do that because it will get me like a weapon upgrade, or I'm going to go do that because there's going to be like an interesting character I've not met before, or a side quest that actually has some narrative meat to it. There's more to this game than meets the eye, and I think that's what surprised me the most as someone who has kind of stayed out of the loop of Star Wars for a good while since Rise of Skywalker, and
Mm.
also isn't the hugest fan of Ubisoft's open world formula. I more kind of view them as comfort games. Like I played Avatar 2 and I quite enjoyed that, but it was one of those games where you can be like, okay, this is a world I enjoy. I'm doing stuff that's fun, and it doesn't get exceptionally deeper than that. And this is quite similar.
Okay. Well, where should we begin? I think that the previews were maybe more critical than people were expecting,
Mm,
specifically around like the gameplay and the gunplay and the
right.
level design. But of course, the full game is many, many, many more hours
Yeah.
of that. So, in terms of that kind of stuff, in terms of like the moment to moment gameplay, how does it come together for you?
So I guess I'll start with the gunplay. I think the biggest impression people had from the previews is K only really has quite a generic blaster.
hmm
It fires the red beams that Star Wars does, but you'll pretty much just be doing those pot shots and so on. And while I wouldn't say it's exceptionally deep, it is quite enjoyable. Like you'll upgrade your blaster to have like rapid fire or charge shots or like an electro bolt that essentially doubles as like a taser for shocking enemies or doing some stuff to switches to get through doors and so on. And something I didn't see covered in the previews too much, if you kill like a stormtrooper or a bandit or like a space pirate, you'll often be able to pick up their weapons, which will range from like light, medium, or heavy, maybe some grenades and so on. So the gunplay is quite engaging. I'd say it can get somewhat repetitive, while there's also a mark and execute mechanic similar to Splinter Cell Conviction, of all things, where
Mm,
you'll click L3 and R3 in the case of the PS5 and kind of mark four targets before K blasts them all in slow motion, which is kind of just a compromise for the speed of combat, which is largely quite terrible because you can't really
okay.
shoot properly while you're driving around. So you kind of have to stop time, shoot them, and do stuff like that. But then extending from the blaster stuff, the hand-to-hand combat is admittedly very simplistic. It's to take down every single enemy I've seen so far after like 15 to 20 hours. It's a free button square combo, like square, square, square. There's a few different animations, or if you're taking them down via stealth, it's going to be get behind them, press square. That kind of stuff is very simple. But I've
Hmm.
seen some enemy types which have some sort of red square, which I think indicates you need a late game upgrade to take them down. But despite it being quite simple, it folds into the like open world exploration and almost like outpost based combat and stealth you'd be doing anyway. I wouldn't think I'd want it to be too much more complicated. Otherwise, it would feel like it might almost get in its own way.
Hmm.
Because initially, I was very much in the opinion of like, oh, this is almost too simple. But when I started exploring and like doing quests and stuff, I was like, okay, like the pace and cadence of this is really immersive and quite fun.
Is there a lot of variety in the quests and missions?
So, surprisingly so, yes. So, you have main quests, essentially, which will take you all over the galaxy, and a lot of those will involve Uncharted esque set pieces or navigating and platforming very large locations. There's one early example where you find an abandoned Star Destroyer, essentially, like stranded in the middle of the desert, and your job is to get in there and steal a power core. And this mission takes place over the course of about 20 minutes, and you're climbing, essentially getting a lot of like story based exposition, and when you get there some stuff happens and you have to run away while everything explodes. And a lot of the story based missions are more confined linear stuff like that,
Mm.
while I was quite surprised with some of the side quests, which are often confined within faction storylines, because the game has four factions, which are essentially criminal syndicates, and you have different like levels of trust with all of them, which will allow you to unlock certain missions, go into certain strongholds, or get certain rewards. And a lot of these had more like dedicated cutscenes and unique narratives than I expected. Like, and sometimes, and I have a feeling that if you don't have allegiances with certain factions, you won't ever see any of these in a single playthrough. Because I got to some people in the open world and they're like, well, I'm not going to talk to you, or you can't come into this part of town unless you're friends with me. So I just walked away and
Mm.
did something else. But yeah, those are often the secondary quests that you'll do. And then there's like smaller contracts you can take on, which often involves stealing something, going into space and not being detected where you're stealing cargo, or just like infiltrating an Imperial bunker to find a certain upgrade item. And those are kind of like the generic Ubisoft outposts, but with far more like depth and potential to fuck around and find out, essentially.
Hmm. So, is there a lot of choice in how you do things, or is it all very like Uncharted scripted linear stuff?
I'd say a lot of the moment to moment like stealth and combat is very you're going to need to kill people or avoid them, that kind of thing.
Uh
But
huh.
there are certain moments throughout missions where you've got a robot called ND5, who's the one with the slutty waist
Yeah.
and the jacket you see in a lot of like the trailers and previews. Sometimes during a quest or in the middle of one, they'll call you and be like, "Oh, we could go with our original deal, like with this syndicate, or we could double cross them and get more money from this other place, but different reputation." And there will be like consequences to
Mm.
that, leading to like what quests you can do later down the line. And I think to me that was the most interesting part of the moment to moment gameplay, mostly because it kind of controls large areas within the open world in which you can go and navigate safely. So using Moss Isley for an example, say a part of that city is controlled by the Crimson Dawn, who's one of the syndicates. If they trusted you, you could just walk in, walk around, but still be sneaky and steal stuff. But if they didn't, they'd stop you at the door. And to complete a mission within their territory, you need to sneak in, and everyone would be immediately hostile towards you. And it's within those freeform environments that a lot of the game mechanics come alive and you want to experiment.
Hmm.
Whereas in some of the story missions, it's often a case of Uncharted style bombastic storytelling.
It feels like kind of an interesting time in Star Wars history for this game because, like, I do
Yeah.
believe that Star Wars is eternal, the eternal IP.
It's not going away, no.
Yeah, but at the same time, that we're in this kind of weird space where it almost feels like nobody can figure out what Star Wars fans want.
No, they can't.
Um, because we haven't had a movie in a long time, and the last time we did it was horrible. And and
They're cancelling all of
the
the fucking
Acolyte got
shows.
canceled. Yeah, and they did like too many shows, and people didn't really seem to like most of them. And it's we're in this sort of weird push and pull between everybody just wants classic Star Wars repeated over and over and over, and then people will call for something new, but then nobody likes anything new either.
Yeah, and when you give them when you give the pigs their slot, like Rise of Skywalker, they complain about that anyway. So
Yeah.
it feels like those big Star Wars fans don't even know what they want.
So what's interesting about Outlaws, like the very first thing you said, right? No lightsabers, so no Jedi either, right?
No, no, nothing,
So
nothing like that.
is it filled with character cameos too?
No, it's this is what shocked me the most, and I think arguably why I enjoyed it as much as I did. The only reference to the original trilogy is in the Mos Eisley Cantina. You go inside, and obviously that booth Han Solo
Yeah.
sits in A New Hope, and he shoots Greedo. There's someone sitting in that booth, and her friend comes up and is like, "Don't sit there; it's cursed." And they're like, "What do you mean? Anyone who sits there gets shot."
Mm,
And it's almost like, "Oh, okay, cute." And then they walk off. But aside from that, and obviously some of the world building surrounding the Empire and
yeah.
stuff, it's all entirely original characters and storytelling. Like they haven't said the word Jedi once because obviously I don't think Kay Vess, the main character, has ever existed in the parts of the world where they've been discussed. She's just kind of another scavenger trying to make a living in this world where the Empire kind of coexists with the
Hmm.
underworld. Like none of that stuff matters to her because she doesn't have a grand destiny or anything. She's just another
Yeah.
person, and I think that's arguably what makes a lot of what Outlaws does interesting, even if their character, at least from everything I've played, isn't really that compelling. They're just calling them a female Han Solo is derivative, but we can get into that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, that is interesting to me, right? Like I would like to see more Star Wars that is grounded in personal stories and isn't just the great war between good and evil and isn't just the Skywalk like orbiting the Skywalker saga forever and ever and ever. But I don't know if people that actually like Star Wars, because I don't, like want that. Like why does this even need to be a Star Wars game?
Money, I
Yeah.
guess, because Kay Bass, the main character, her overriding character trait or motivation is she's lived her life being stomped down on by the Empire
Mm,
or other criminals and stuff, and that they very much talk about, oh, I'd love just like one big score or some kind of steady gig, so I can just go and be happy living with my little pet or whatever. And it's a lot of it's just about like the people you meet along the way. Like one thing I was quite shocked about is how many random people in the world you can just talk to, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not having much luck gambling," or "I'll save a village from like some pirates who are attacking," and then I'll talk to someone and they'll like unfurl some cool story in front of me, and
hmm.
I'm like, okay, this is only a few lines of dialogue, but if you're getting that from like 5 to 10 characters in a large open world over the course of a couple of hours, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, this place feels lived in. I'd say that's a big way to describe it. Like even compared to Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order, those games felt quite I don't know, vapid and static in terms of like the way you explored that world, and they relied on fan service a little bit more. But this one doesn't really do that, and in a way, I think that makes it a bit more loose and enjoyable.
Hmm. And I guess the answer to my question really is to sell plushies of Nyx.
Oh yeah, he's straight up just really really cute.
Yeah.
There's like this mini game where you can kind of, it's similar to Monster Hunter when they make the food.
Hmm.
You go to like these small little pop-ups, I guess you'd call them, and you order some food, and it's like this flashy animation where a robot makes the food and then they hand it to you, and then you kind of take part in a quick time event to like eat the food and get it ready, which is really cool. It's a part of like Star Wars culture I didn't consider before, but it's kind of just Kay and Nyx like eating food and like bonding together, and it's cute, and it leads to like some unlockable bonuses that give him buffs, and I'm like, okay, this is the kind of stuff you want in a Star Wars open world. It's like making an effort to build it out and do some interesting stuff instead of just treating the player like a fool and going, Luke Skywalker's over there, you know that, don't you?
Right.
You stupid idiot. And this doesn't seem to do that, and I don't know, I guess that's cool.
Yeah. Cool to us as media connoisseurs, but will it be cool to your average Star Wars Andy? I guess.
I don't know, because it's like, it's doing all of those things that make those kind of people angry. For one, it isn't really cemented in established characters or lore. You play as a woman, which we all know Star Wars fans are very
Yeah.
afraid of. And it's trying to be like a Ubisoft kind of open world game. So one of the things I keep seeing is like out of context clips on TikTok of like gameplay, and they're going, "Oh, this looks so awful." But playing it, it's like I had that impression too when I started. But then you get into the cadence of like messing around with the gameplay mechanics or going on quests, and it's legit quite a bit of fun.
Hmm.
I don't think it rewrites any rule books, but in terms of like what you want a Star Wars game to be, it does more than you'd
Hmm.
expect.
My favorite Star Wars game ever is Squadrons.
Oh, I do
I
love Squadrons. Yeah,
love
yeah, yeah.
Squadrons, and this has a bit of space dogfight,
It does.
spaceship
Yeah,
battle too,
it's
right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh oh.
Well, yeah, it does. It does. So it's better than Starfield.
Okay.
I guess that's the basis. I'll take it. So you have a ship, obviously, and there's an orbit around each planet essentially, as opposed to just being a wide open amount of
Yeah.
space. But in this orbit, there'll be different space stations you can dock on and visit, which are quite like substantial spaces in their own right, which is cool. Or you'll sort through like asteroid fields or debris fields full of like destroyed ships and stuff to find crafting ingredients or quests or different locations. And then from there, you can essentially, what do they call it? Hyperspeed
Mm.
or jump to different systems. And then I suppose like each orbit outside a different planet is kind of an open world zone in itself.
Hmm.
Like I jumped into Tatooine, and the Imperials were having like a dogfight with some space pirates, and it was kind of like you could join in or you could veer to the side and land because you don't want to get involved in that stuff.
Okay.
But you brought up like the dogfighting, and I'd say in this it is very simple. Like it's kind of follow the white dot, fire it, lock on with missiles, heal yourself, make sure you're not getting hit, all of that stuff. At least from what I've played and a few different weapon types, it's not especially complicated. And it's kind of a shame that you have less of an incentive to go out into space because you know it's not a wide open area. So unless you're going there for space, no, unless you're going there for quests and
Mm.
stuff, I kind of just ignored it.
Okay. Sounds like I don't know if you ever played Everspace 2, but
No.
it's the same kind of little hub open
Yeah, it's
worlds
like a
that
little
you
hub. That's how I
move
describe
between.
it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll stick to Squadrons if I want my dog
Yeah,
fights.
I think so. That was a cool like one of my favorite things was I unlocked a weapon which wasn't just the generic blaster. It was like I held the trigger and it kind of built up a bolt, and then you let it go and it go boom, and you can wipe out a ship in like one
Mm.
hit with that if you're a good aim. And it's satisfying and it feels good, but it feels like they've deliberately made it quite simplistic so it's easy to engage with. Like a lot of the systems in this game, I think. I think they know it's a sizable open world and they need a lot of different mechanics and so on. So making one more complicated than the other is just going to screw with the
Mm.
pacing. like the fucking lockpicking
Oh,
minigame,
great.
which I'm not. Well, it's not bad. It's just quite obnoxious, and there's sometimes too much of it.
Hmm. Is there? You've talked about like the different factions and the exploration, but is there like a is there an arc? Is there a villain? Is there like a main story?
So yes, but they're not that
Uh huh.
compelling. It's just like an evil rich empire dude, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get you, KVS," and I think that's the most annoying part of Outlaws is it does a terrible job at a first impression. It doesn't spend enough time fleshing out who Kate is, where she comes
Mm,
from, why you should care about what she's going for, or why you should care about this villain. It isn't until like 3 or 4 hours in where you're kind of doing your own quest of your own accord and getting nestled into these factions that it really gets interesting. But what you're essentially trying to do in the main narrative is break into a vault on the planet of Canto Bight, which is the casino planet from The Last
oh
Jedi,
yeah.
because that's where Kay comes from. And you're essentially trying to rob this Empire guy's vault. And the main quests revolve around essentially recruiting a team from across the galaxy of like different outlaws who are good at picking locks or arming bombs and all of that
Mm,
stuff. And I assume towards the end of the game, you're going to go back to Canto Bight and pull off the heist that you failed in the opening and get your big score. That seems to be what it's leading towards. But aside from that, there hasn't been too many compelling main villains. Some of the coolest people are like the leaders of the factions, like you've got the Huts or the Crimson Dawn or the Akiga, which is like these weird fish people,
mm,
and the Pikes, who are and a couple of others. Those are where the interesting like villains and characters come from because you'll start to figure out what their behaviors are like, who likes who, or who you should betray or put your allegiances to get the best gear or money or credits and so on. That's where the interesting storytelling is. I think in terms of the main narrative, it's not that interesting here at all,
hmm.
which sucks because it could have been cool.
It does seem like you're more into it than I expected you would be.
I'm more into it than I expected to be as well, especially because this is kind of a review I took because no one else could because everyone's at
Yeah.
Gamescom or is at events and stuff. So it was like, go on then, I'll do Star
Yeah.
Wars. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more of it tonight and like getting a bit deeper and exploring some of the planets a bit more because so far I've explored Tatooine quite a bit, or Tashara Moon is another one,
Mm,
and then there's a jungle planet that I haven't barely touched. I went there and got absolutely battered because everyone hated
mhm,
me. So I think that was the game saying, "You're not ready, so go away." And there's like a snow planet where, as opposed to that being open world, it's just a very dense city with lots of moving parts. And that's also something I want to bring up actually. Mos Eisley is obviously one of the most iconic locations in Star Wars
yeah.
history, but whenever we go there in the films and stuff, it's always like a couple of streets and the cantina. Whereas in this, it is genuinely quite
Mm,
sprawling. I walked around for 15 minutes, could not find the cantina, had no idea where I was going. Like I got lost, and it was like, okay, I could not be doing any missions or anything, and I could just walk around this city at a snail's pace for half an hour and be entertained by like the way NPCs are moving about, or the people I talk to, or the shops I go to. And it's got a Star Warsy vibe, which is really cool because you're not a like massive popular hero or a Jedi or anything like that.
mhm.
You're just like a woman who is like scavenging and scoundering to make a living or survive. And I think it's cool to have that place in that world. Like you don't have a higher destiny, you're just like there.
Yeah.
And Star Wars doesn't do that often enough.
R-
Especially in video games where they want to give you that power fantasy, and this kind of doesn't. And that might be its biggest boon.
Yeah. Quite a contrast from the Jedi series.
Yeah, and she's a more interesting character than the ginger one. What's his name?
Cal Kestis.
That's the one. That laser. Yeah, she's not great, but she's cute
uh,
and like she's not very good at being a scoundrel, which is obnoxious to begin with. But then it gets a bit charming, like when she's trying to make deals with people. When she's like, "Well, I'll only do it if you give me all of the pay up front, and then someone's just like, well, no, fuck you, I'll get someone else to do the job, and then she's like, oh no, never mind, I'll do it, you don't need to pay me. And there's a few moments like that, or you try and get past a security checkpoint with a stormtrooper, and they're like, your name is this, when you give them a fake ID, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, I don't believe you, and then you just get arrested. It's like little things like that where it's like, okay, there's some character here. And one thing that the gamers will enjoy is that K-Vest, it's not really explicit in a lot of the romance and stuff they do, but they are queer, and there's a bit of that throughout the game, which is quite interesting.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, okay, they're going there for Star Wars, which is
pretty
like,
woke.
Pretty woke. It's pretty woke.
Pretty sweet baby of them.
I think those people have probably written off this game already. But yeah, there's a lot of like neat character moments or small bits of dialogue where you're convinced that like, okay, this is a lived-in world that isn't dictated by the grand destiny of like 5 characters.
Yeah, I do like that a lot. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, there's no like they haven't said the word Jedi. I haven't seen a single lightsaber. Like none of that has
just
been discussed, really.
But you've seen Jabba the Hutt, right?
No, not in person.
Oh, okay.
Like, you see the people operating underneath him, because I'm just blabbering on now, but when you sneak into like gang strongholds or big like Imperial outposts or comms towers, you kind of just find stormtroopers and elite officers just going like, oh, I hate this job, or like, when do you get off shift? And they're talking like normal people, and I think that's kind of cool. And then you feel bad for just killing them.
Sort of the mundane of Star Wars, but
yeah, because it is. It's just like I'm stuck in this like backwater desert planet, watching over like an outpost that no one's going to touch.
Yeah,
and those moments are cute. And one thing that I think is worth bringing up, considering this is like a Ubisoft open world game, you're rarely looking for icons and stuff. Similar to, I guess, The Witcher. You'll sometimes just be driving around, and on your HUD you'll see like a question mark, and it'll be like, oh, I wonder what's over there.
Yeah.
And then you can just drive. Often it's like a collectible or a secret or a little outpost that you can do some stuff in. But there's only ever like a handful of those, so you never feel overwhelmed. It's like worthwhile distractions. I guess I just drive the most.
Cool. Anything else you want to touch on?
Oh my god, what have I not talked about? The lockpicking's a bit mid, but it gets better once you get like upgrades and so on.
Is there a good
it.
RPG system? Or is it just a skill tree and you level up, you get a point, you spend a point?
So as opposed to like a skill tree, there's kind of like experts you get to know throughout the game. They're basically characters who like specialize in like upgrading your speeder, doing stuff to your ship, and all of that stuff. And you'll take on their quest, and then you'll need to collect certain items or do certain things to unlock the right to unlock a new skill or something. So it's not like a skill tree per se. It's more like, there's no like level up system. It's like you need to do stuff within the game to unlock more complementary skills, which is cool because it makes you want to experiment.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Is there a bunch of vehicles too you can drive?
No, just the speeder. You can't hijack, which is kind of shitty.
Yeah.
But the speeder feels great. It's very easy to like bob and weave between people, and there's a few upgrades you can unlock, like a boost or a jump or a few other bits. And it feels nice because the world is vast enough for you to go super bloody fast. But I will say the cracks begin to show in the open world when you like get a wanted level from like the Empire or some syndicate, and if like 10 enemies come at once, they will all just use their speeders, park, and then get up and kill you. So by the end of like a firefight, there'll be like 15 speeders just loitering around in a field somewhere, and I'm like, this is really stupid. They didn't think this through.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, pretty positive. Our review goes up. Well, it will already be up, and I'm currently undecided on a score at the time of recording, but it'll be interesting to see where I land on it, because
this one came in pretty high.
Pretty positive.
You had less than a week to play it.
Less than a week, yes. And Ubisoft said it takes about 30 hours to do it if you're mainly focusing on the story, and I have not been doing that.
Yeah.
So we'll see how far I get along and how that reflects in the review. But yeah, pleasantly surprised, I think. This one caught me off guard.
Cool.
Especially as someone who's pretty tired of Star Wars, but it tries not to be what we associate Star Wars with, and I think that's why it's so fun.
Yeah. And it's also kind of in the last good window, this like August, end of summer. It's only going up against Wukong, which, despite the hype, is a pretty niche game compared
Yeah.
to open world Ubisoft Outlaws. It pretty much is general appeal as you can get.
No, it's like it's an open world stuff. Because my brother-in-law came over and they're like Johnny Gamer.
Yeah,
They're like they love Horizon, and they saw me play this, going, "Oh wow, this looks gorgeous!" and
yeah,
all of that.
exactly.
It ticks those boxes for those kind of people, and it ticked my boxes. I didn't think it would, but
Oh,
here we are. I love Star Wars, Eric.
apparently.
What's his name is my hero.
What? What's his name? What
Who's
a
the fucking-
glowing endorsement.
No, I can't remember. The Star Wars man.
Luke Skywalker.
No. Well, yeah, he's the Star Wars man. Dave Filoni. I don't know
Dave
his fucking
Filoni.
name.
Yeah, yeah.
They should have cancelled the Acolyte.
The
Okay?
outlaw of the movie business.
He is, yeah.
Okay, very cool. I'm glad that you liked it more than you thought you would. And your full review is linked down in the description with a score. We'll keep it.
Down there. It'll have a score by now. I promise.
We'll keep it mysterious for now. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's The Gamer. No space.
Bye.